after the Dateline leak, there was an administrative investigation by the court at the direction of the judge, all right, to find out who that leak was. An administrative investigation. Okay, that's investigation number one. That investigation was completed, a report was filed, and that file was sealed. Okay? You can see it in the documents. It's a sealed file. It's public. It's public that it's there and sealed. Then, and I thought that was it. I thought it was all done. Then in January, I got contacted by the Ada County Sheriff's Department.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Listen to Pavarotti. Can I be your superhero?
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I am your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. And you know, as I watched that interview with Dr. Brent Turvey, that was conducted by the Custody Queens, which I'll put the link of that video in the description of this one, I had a lot of thoughts. A lot of things came to mind. One of the things that was very nice hearing somebody talk about how all the evidence in the case points away from Bryan Kohberger, you know, because we have been saying that forever. And it's nice to have an insider, somebody with a little bit of clout, say the same thing. He said a whole lot in that interview, though. And some things really make you sit back and think. And then I think about everything that's going on right now. I mean, I can pull up video after video after video of people discussing, strangely enough, the leak. It's all about the leak. Now, I don't know how many people out there over the last 8 or 9 months actually did videos on the leak investigation. I don't think too many of them did, but you know what? I believe I've done about 20 ever since the plea deal. I have made the claim. I said, look, once this leak investigation is up, the defense team is going to file some type of relief. And depending upon how egregious the leak was, they can not only withdraw a plea, they can ask for sanctions, such as removing the death penalty to get a new trial. And I have been steadfast in that, and I've brought it to you many times. So now when I see all of the talking heads out there all discussing the leak investigation, and I see Mr. Turvey in this interview going into a little bit more detail about the leak investigation, well, it kind of perks up my ears, and it makes me do deep dives. And you know, when I do a video, I like to bring you some real information, not something I looked up in 2 minutes on a Google search, but something that I've studied thoroughly for you so I can bring you the accurate information. And from what I gather, if I am correct in the information that I have gathered, I am going to let you in on some potential really big things happening here really soon, not only with the Kohberger case, but in things going on around the Kohberger case that could be really, really detrimental to some individuals if they played a part in what I suspect, and I believe is what the Ada County Sheriff's Office suspect, and probably what that special prosecutor suspected, was some nefariousness around those leaks. And we'll get into a lot more detail here in just a minute. But I want to give you a full, thorough breakdown of the things that I heard that Dr. Turvey covered in this video, some things that I think are very on point and I agree with, and I appreciate him saying it. Some things I totally disagree with, and I can't believe somebody with his level of experience can even contemplate those things in the way that he does. And it makes me just really wonder, is that what he really thinks? Or does he just have confirmation bias about certain things? Or is it more purposeful misdirection? No, you need to look over here versus over there. I don't know. But I do know that he's in a pretty big feud now with Ann Taylor, and I will say Ann team. And more things we get confirmed throughout the way. You know, forever people told us Ann Taylor wasn't even his attorney anymore. None of his attorneys were his attorneys. Well, now Dr. Turvey confirms that not only is Ann Taylor still representing Bryan Kohberger, but she is guarding him like a hawk. But there was some other things that he said that make me kind of question it. And I don't know if it's just a case of he spoke too soon with talking with Turvy in this book and giving interviews, and it's prior to when the defense team wanted him to say anything because of plans they had, or if it's purposeful. I don't know. He could just be frustrated in Ann's response when he did talk and be, skeptical of her and her doings, or just straight mad at her. I don't know. But I'm going to try to figure it out because, that's what old Pav does. So we're going to discuss quite a bit in this video. I'm going to bring you quite a bit of information. The first thing we're going to discuss, though, is some potential really big bombshells coming out about what everybody's talking about, that old Pav's been talking about forever, and that is the leak investigation into the case. Hold on to your hats, folks, because this one is going all around and is going fast. Let's roll.
After the Dateline leak, there was an administrative investigation by the court at the direction of the judge, all right, to find out who that leak was. An administrative investigation, okay? That's investigation number one. That investigation was completed, a report was filed, and that file was sealed, okay? You can see it in the documents. It's a sealed file. It's public. It's public, but it's there and sealed. Then, and I thought that was it. I thought it was all done. Then in January, I got contacted by the Ada County Sheriff's Department, a guy who said, I'm a detective and I have, I'm in charge of, me and two other officers are in charge of conducting a criminal investigation into the NBC data leak. So this is a second separate criminal investigation.
Now, he went on to admonish Ann Taylor for even telling him that he could speak with that Ada County sheriff and assist in the investigation. And his way of thinking is no defense attorney would ever, allow him to speak with the sheriff in an investigation. And she was trying to hang him out to dry. And that was his perspective on it, which I can appreciate that. I mean, that could be the case. Or whenever an investigation like that is going on, the investigators, a lot of people, they're investigating Ann Taylor and team. Yeah, they're investigating Ann Taylor and team because a proper investigation investigates everything. So they would need to get statements from Ann Taylor and team that they also did not participate in any leaks if the leak was uncovered on the law enforcement side as well. So Ann Taylor could have just been having him discuss his non-role in the leak just to clear that side of the investigation and get it over with and done with. But who knows? I mean, he could be right. He could be wrong. I don't know. I'm not here to determine that. But here's what I am here to determine, and that is what the truth of the entire matter is. Because here's what I do know, and I know this for a fact because I keep logging it on these timelines. There was a special day that I went over with all of my folks a long time ago, and it was 6/26/25. And this was the day that behind the scenes, about 6 individuals that I feel like have some kind of part that they played in this entire thing, they all made a deal. They all made deals on that particular day behind the scenes. You have to dig through all of their records to figure out that all their deals were made on 6/26/25. It's weird. I mean, I believe Kohberger's deal was made that day. I know that Meade and Umpenauer's deals were made that day. Burroughs' deal was made that day. I mean, it was just weird. But then I do know that after that, the judge orders the special prosecutor and denies the continuance for the Kohberger team, which in turn led to the plea deal. And BK was sentenced on July 23rd, 2025. So this is my kind of progression of things. And then after BK was sentenced, the judge went through and removed the gag order, and he started talking about unsealing all the court records. And the first date that he unsealed court records was September 3rd, 2025. And then between September 3rd, 2025, the first time he unsealed records, and December 18th, 2025, the last day he unsealed records, he actually unsealed records twice in between that. So it was kind of going steady. Unseal records, unseal records, unseal records, unseal records. Then boom. December 18th, 2025 was the last time the judge ordered unsealing of records. He hasn't even provided a new list of the records that could be unsealed to the defense and prosecution team to find out if they have any objections to it. It just stopped on December 18th, 2025. There has been zero action now through today, almost 5 months later, on unsealing any more records in this case. And I find that to be really, really, really strange and a big old red flag. So how do you go from unsealing court records and doing it steadily, and then all of a sudden 5 months pass and we haven't heard a word about unsealing anything? Well, that brings us to today. And then I've already told everybody I know there's ways around it, but the official deadline for filing post-conviction relief or habeas petitions is September 3rd, 2026. Well, today is May, whatever today is, May 14th, 15th. I don't know what day it is, but I do know that it's getting pretty close between today and that window for the defense to file something. And I also know that from the beginning, just after the sentencing, Pav has done many, many videos saying once the leak investigation's done, the Kohberger defense team is going to file something. Now we got all this stuff coming out. But here's what I want to really dive in on for you, because I think you're going to find this very, very interesting. And that's how the leak investigation actually works. And when you see like Brent Turvey say that there is now an Ada County Sheriff's investigation, a second investigation, I'm going to tell you what that means, because nobody else, I believe, is going to tell you what it means, because I don't even know if they know. I don't even know if Turvey knew. But here's how this thing works, right? So the judge, old Hippler here, assigns a special prosecutor for an administrative investigation, right? He got that part right, I know. And upon completion, the record is sealed and it's turned over to the defense team for examination. Now, they may put out a redacted version of the results of that investigation, but probably not. But they definitely have to turn over that investigation to the defense. And the defense has a chance to examine that investigation. Now, if I have been right all along, and once the defense got that record, they can examine it, and then their path forward would be absolutely crystal clear. The defendant files a state or federal habeas corpus petition. They argue the plea was not entered knowingly or voluntarily. They claim external trial pressure violated due process rights. And then they use the actual investigative report from the special prosecutor. They use the final special prosecutor report as new evidence to get a trial. And they would also ask for sanctions if they were granted a new trial. So that is the clear path forward for me. That's what I've always believed, and it seems to be kind of rolling right along with what I've always believed. But then you add this new element of the Ada County Sheriff's Office opening a criminal investigation. And what does that mean? If, and this is the only time that they would do this, y'all, if during the investigation by that special prosecutor, they uncover evidence of a separate crime, and if they uncover evidence of a separate crime along with that leak, then they cannot go and prosecute individuals outside of law enforcement. So what happens is they have to refer it to the sheriff's department for them to do a criminal investigation into parties that are not part of law enforcement. And I'll explain more about that here in a minute, but what it tells me is not the special prosecutor, like Mr. Turvey was suggesting, completed his investigation and now they assign the sheriff's department to investigate Ann Taylor, because that is not what the special prosecutor's investigation would have entailed. He was investigating leaks. Now, if he uncovered a leak and he uncovered individuals outside of law enforcement that participated in disseminating that leak for profit, that is a separate crime in itself, and that means they would have to turn it over to the sheriff's department for investigation. So what it tells me, number one, is the special prosecutor not only uncovered the leak, and the defense now has it, but they also uncovered additional information that will get somebody hemmed up. Now, who could that be? Well, I don't know. Let me show you this. Again, Special prosecutor only has jurisdiction over court personnel. The investigation may lead to civilians outside of the justice system. So he investigates the leak on court personnel, and that court personnel, which include law enforcement in that, once he uncovers that leak, he turns over the report to Hippler. But during that process, if he uncovers a private citizen, such as private investigators, journalists, or corporate actors, had some role in disseminating this stuff, then he has to refer it over to the sheriff's department to investigate these external crimes. So now the sheriff's department isn't investigating anything above board here because the special prosecutor's already done it. The sheriff's department is investigating what happens from here down. The sheriff investigates bribery if money was paid for the data. They investigate receiving stolen property if digital files were taken. They investigate conspiracy if citizens actively helped court insiders. So what that means is it's not the media company. They're not going to be held liable for anything. They obtain the information. But if there was, say, an intermediary, a private citizen that received that information from one of the leakers, and then they sold it to the media, that would be considered, if it wasn't stolen property, it would be considered bribery. But if it was considered stolen property like digital files, well, then that would be considered selling stolen property. And if they find out that it was a plan with the investigators or the court personnel, that private citizen to do this, then you've got a conspiracy, and that's a big charge. But what does that mean? That means once that sheriff's investigation is done, they're investigating private citizens. If they find evidence that they did that, then we may see some people on the periphery of this thing actually getting charges brought against them. And I would hope that they wouldn't put that kind of pressure on people that was possibly suing, I don't know, one of the universities trying to get paid for this mess after they created some of the issues around the conviction in it. That would be on another scale. So I hope that isn't clear as mud, but that is the process. Now that we know that that Ada County Sheriff is investigating, then that tells us right there that the prosecutor uncovered a leak, turned it in, and then sent a referral to the sheriff's department to investigate other crimes outside of the law enforcement for things like bribery, receiving stolen property, and conspiracy. We may see some absolute fireworks here soon on this one, y'all. But that's number one.
So this is a second separate criminal investigation. The first one was administrative. It had a result and it's sealed. Now they're doing a separate criminal investigation. And I don't know when they started that, but they contacted me in January. Then, most interestingly, and I didn't respond, by the way, I didn't respond to that. And I have no intention of responding to it. I wouldn't talk to the police without a subpoena and a defense attorney with me, just because I don't trust the process in Idaho at this moment.
I was just gonna say, especially not in Idaho.
No, well, in this context, I don't trust them because I don't know what their goal or their intentions are. All right. So Ann Taylor contacts me about 6 weeks later, giving me permission to talk to the police. This is a red flag for me, like a burning, bright, screaming red flag, because the first thing I did was contact my clients and say, hey, I've been asked by my attorney client in this case, my former attorney client in this case, to speak freely with the police about the leak. They're going to ask me questions about everything that will violate. All that'll do is just violate the privilege top to bottom. And she goes, every single attorney, I talked to 3 of them. They're all top-notch attorneys. They said, do not talk to the police. You're going to be out hanging out there to dry while Ann Taylor has invited you to violate the privilege that she has with Bryan Kohberger, which I would not do. So I didn't respond to her either, but she gave me permission to do it. What should have happened from any ethical defense attorney is that she should have put herself between the police and any of her experts being spoken to and said, you may talk to me and ask me questions, but you will not talk to my experts. That's what she should have done. Instead, she said, hey, go ahead and talk to him. Say whatever you want. Are you out of your mind? You think I'm going to do that? No way. Then they contacted me again about 4 weeks ago, I think, 3 or 4 weeks ago, saying, hey, we're still interested in doing an interview. It was just really casual, like I'm their buddy. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. So that investigation is still ongoing. That criminal investigation is ongoing. But understand this, they concluded their administrative investigation and filed a report. That signifies to me, and should signify to anybody with a brain, that they know who the leak is. And they're not going after their own people. They're going after somebody in Ann Taylor's office.
See, I agree with everything that he said there, especially the part about they found who the leak was and the criminal investigation now is underway. The only part I don't agree with is simply because the criminal investigators asked to speak with him and Ann Taylor said it's okay for you to speak with him. That's the entire basis for saying, well, they're going after the defense team. That's who they're focused on. I have to disagree with that. I would disagree in a manner in which Ann Taylor said, just talk to him freely. Well, if one of her people was the one who did the leak and she's telling them to talk with them freely, I mean, she's going to have some liability in that as well, because it was one of her people that she hired. And I believe it's more likely that she's saying, go ahead and speak with them, because we already know that none of us had anything to do with the leak. Go ahead and clear that part of the investigation so that they can focus in on the one party probably that really did have some criminal liability that was a civilian, because that's what they're investigating, is civilian responsibility and civilian crimes. So I find that to be just a little bit troubling as it relates to apparently his private feud with Ann Taylor. And then I think about something else as he's going through and he's talking about that feud with Ann Taylor, and he's kind of running her through the mud and saying that she's the one holding everybody back from being able to help Bryan Kohberger, when I firmly believe it's the other way around. And I'm going against the grain on this. I know everybody right now is up in arms. Ann Taylor is that she's cooperative. And if you go back to my very first video, I suggested cooperation from Ann Taylor with even some really bad people. But along the way, I have realized that that is not the case. So we can have suspicions, but when we have enough evidence to tell us the truth of the matter, then I have a hard time going against it, just because, one of her experts comes out and has a disagreement with her and has a public feud. So I don't just jump on bandwagons just because we finally have somebody speaking. I do appreciate the fact that he goes out and he talks about all the evidence that does not point to Bryan Kohberger, because that's factual. But when I listen to his words as he's going through and talking about the relationship with Ann Taylor, some of the things that he was saying throughout the time he worked with Ann Taylor, and then I think about what's happening now, it's kind of a disconnect for me. And I'll show you why I say that. Here's some of the things that he said about Ann Taylor, and then I'm going to show you what he said about the recent feud. I'm going to show you who brought him onto the case, and then I'm going to show you who signed that cease and desist letter for him to shut up.
Didn't Ann want you to go talk to him by yourself? Like, not even necessarily in her presence?
Yeah, I would assume it would be in her presence or with the investigator or something, but multiple times I was asked if I wanted to meet with him, and I explicitly said no. I don't do that. That's not what I do. You need me to be completely objective and focused on the physical evidence, not on anything to do with what Mr. Kohberger has to say. And
Do you think that there was any intentional reason behind her wanting you to speak with Kohberger?
Oh yeah, the whole thing, again, this is part of the misleading me. She wanted to convince me he was innocent. And I said to her, I don't care. When I'm on the stand, and this is not, again, it's not a secret. I will tell this to any client who hires me. If you put me on the stand and ask me, what do you think of so-and-so? I will say the same thing. I don't care. I don't care about Bryan Kohberger. I don't care about any of the other people involved. I don't care about anybody. I'm not here to make friends. I'm not here to get a date.
As I watched this interview, I made notes, but there was a few points in it where, I had to drop my pen, excuse me, because when I heard what he said, I went, why are they not questioning what he just said right there? Why surely I'm not the only person that's listening to this interview that made my eyes roll in the back of my head when I heard what he just said. And then I think about it in the greater context of things. So what he said was, yeah, Ann Taylor wanted him several times to go meet with Bryan Kohberger. Wanted him to go meet with Kohberger. Why? Because she felt like he was innocent, and if he met with him, then he would understand that he was innocent as well. Now, I understand due to his expertise that he wouldn't want to meet with Bryan Kohberger and skew his opinion on facts around the crime scene. Of course, once I heard his facts around the crime scene, I wasn't too confident in, his abilities as a crime scene recreationist, number one. But either way, but he goes on to say, listen close to what he says and tell me I can't be the only person that has a problem with this statement.
Oh yeah, the whole thing, again, this is part of the misleading me. She wanted to convince me he was innocent.
Okay, so as he's giving this entire interview, he won't completely come out and say it, but he believes that Bryan Kohberger is likely innocent. At the very least, he believes every piece of evidence in this case points away from Bryan Kohberger. He said that emphatically. He said while he may be legally guilty because he pled guilty, he could still be factually innocent, is what he said. But then when I hear what he said right there, that this was part of Ann Taylor misleading him. She wanted him to go and talk to Bryan Kohberger because she believed he is innocent, and she wanted him to believe he was innocent as well, and he would know that if he talked to him. Well, if she believes he's innocent, and he would have known he was innocent if he talked to him, then how is that misleading him if he believes that it's likely Bryan Kohberger is innocent? Now, if she said that she thought he was guilty and she wanted him to talk to him because then he would know he was guilty as well, and then he came to the epiphany that no evidence pointed to him and he's factually innocent, then that would be misleading. Yeah, misleading him that he's guilty when he's not. But how is misleading him that he's innocent and he believes there likely is the ability for him to be innocent? How do those two things go hand in hand? You see, when I hear that stuff, I go, wait a minute. So if she believes he's innocent and she wants you to talk to him so you'll know he's innocent, you think that's her misleading him to believe that he's innocent, then you really believe he's guilty based on those words. And that's your words, not mine. So it just sends up a little bit of a red flag around things to me. I listen to what people say, but maybe I'm reading into that situation wrong. Y'all let me know in the comments below. But clearly, if somebody says, I think this person's innocent, I want you to talk to them, and I think they're misleading me, then I think they're misleading me that they're innocent. I think that's pretty much plain as day, and he seems to talk in pretty plain English. But next point.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that the first time you heard this admonishment was publicly. You haven't had any direct contact with her since before the plea?
Sam, this was a great question. The answer is no, of course not. If you were going to, let me back up and say this. If you were going to admonish an expert for some behavior, you would probably want to talk to them first about what they did and why, and specifically what they did and why, as part of what's going on. But our relationship dramatically deteriorated once she made this surprise plea deal, which surprised most of the team. Well, there's a guilt phase and then there's a mitigation phase in the death penalty case. And the mitigation experts, we never met them. And even the guilt phase experts who were trying to reconstruct the crime or determine the events and the actions, we didn't talk to each other. We were very much compartmentalized. So I wouldn't even have anything to share from them other than the findings that are in the defense autopsy report. There's not an autopsy evaluation done by a defense expert. And I have access to that, but I obviously haven't shared that with anybody.
That's a perfect lead into, I think, the next question. I know that this is something I'm super interested in, and most people in this chat are as well. How did you get involved with this case, Dr. Turvey?
Well, it's not a secret that I was hired, so I can certainly discuss that. It's not a secret that I wrote a report, nor are my findings a secret because they were publicized in January with all the disclosures. In fact, there was an article written about my findings in Fox News back in January 2025. I think. Wait, yeah, 2025. And I was one of the only experts whose findings were disclosed to the public. How did I get involved? Well, I was, I would say, collegial, good friends and collegial with Bicca Barlow, who was hired on early on as a DNA expert. I worked a case with her in California.
Okay, so as he says there, he had not received any communications from Ann Taylor before all of these disclosures have been coming out in the book by Whitcomb, and now his statements to the media, and now doing interviews. He said he did not have any contact with Ann Taylor, and he felt like that, she should have contacted him, and, instead of admonishing him publicly before doing that and telling him what he did wrong. And he sees that as, nefariousness on the part of Ann Taylor. Another way to look at that, though, because when I put on these Rowdy Roddy Piper sunglasses and I try to see through all of the distortions and all the other noise to try to look at the truth through all the BS, and I look at the entire situation, I go, well, that could be one way. Or the other thing to look at is if everything was going as I've seen it this entire time according to plan. And one of the things the defense team has been asking for a long time really is low media attention. They wanted as low a media attention as possible for a period of time. And I believe to get past the leak investigation, to get these things reinitiated, that was part of their plan. And now they have one of their experts out creating a media storm. And that would be a reason to admonish them publicly, because based on his own words, she should have contacted him before doing that and tell him what he did wrong so he would know what he did wrong. Well, what you did wrong, though, Turvy, if that's the case, if I'm reading everything correctly, what you did wrong was not contacting her before you disclosed all this information and started the media storm. You see, if you would have contacted her first before you did that, you would have known if you were doing wrong or not, and then she wouldn't have had to publicly admonish you with a cease and desist letter. But you didn't do that. You did it and then got punished with a cease and desist letter questioning your credibility. And then you blame her for not contacting you before she did a cease and desist letter when you didn't contact her before you did what you did. So, it works both ways, and it just depends on what the real end game is. If Turvy's correct in all this and Ann Taylor's working with the state to keep Bryan Kohberger at bay and everybody away from him until all this goes away, to solidify everything in stone and nobody can help him, well, then I'm wrong and I'm calling the wrong shots. But if I'm right and the defense team is keeping everybody from making any public statements, including Bryan Kohberger's family, I might add, and nobody's ever made a public statement from the time of the plea deal until today, except for Mr. Turvy, then that means he would be throwing a monkey wrench in their plans by doing that. And then in that respect, I could see that. And his entire basis of everything is Ann Taylor, Ann Taylor, Ann Taylor. But I have to remind everybody that it's not just Ann Taylor, Ann Taylor, Ann Taylor. If we're going to start thinking that Ann Taylor is working with the state in a conspiracy to keep everybody away from Bryan Kohberger so he goes away forever for a crime he didn't commit, then you got to add two other names to that list that you're accusing of that. And that is Elisa Massoff and Bicca Barlow. And by the way, Bicca Barlow is not an Idaho attorney. She came from California, but she would absolutely have to be complicit in all of this, because it's not just Ann Taylor that has control of Bryan Kohberger right now. Nobody can get to him. All three of his attorneys are still representing Bryan Kohberger. And we know that for a fact because of what Turvy has done in expressing all this stuff publicly, because they did issue a cease and desist letter. And it was signed by Ann Taylor, but it was also signed by Elisa Massoff and Bicca Barlow as well. And who brought you onto the case?
How did I get involved? Well, I was, I would say, collegial, good friends and collegial with Bicca Barlow, who was hired on early on as a DNA expert. I worked a case with her in California.
And you can see here's the press release, and it is from Ann Taylor Law Offices. Sure enough, April 28, 2026, State versus Bryan Kohberger. were writing the recent statements made by Brent Turvey. He was an expert hired by the defense late in the case. His confidentiality agreement was signed October 30th, 2024 and continues to this day. The agreement with Mr. Turvey was crystal clear that all materials, as well as any opinions that he developed as an expert, were to be kept confidential. Mr. Turvey was reminded when the court lifted the non-dissemination order, the duty of confidentiality continued until he was released from it by the defense. Mr. Turvey was reminded. So that tells me that somebody made contact with Mr. Turvey after the gag order was lifted and reminded him, don't do it, don't do it. And he did it anyway. So it sounds to me like they did contact him in advance. In his role as an expert, Mr. Turvey was asked solely to provide an opinion about the crime scene, nothing else. As such, he had access to view some items related to the case. He was one of many experts relied upon by the defense team in this case. Mr. Turvey has not been released from his confidentiality agreement. He's now speaking about topics that are still confidential, many of which are outside areas of his expertise. The defense team, not Ann Taylor, the defense team is appalled by Mr. Turvey's behavior and his release of documents and information that he knows are confidential. It is the opinion of the defense team that Mr. Turvey falls outside of ethical and legal norms that are applied to experts in criminal cases, and his reliability should be seen through the lens of this conduct. Attorneys for Bryan Kohberger, Ann Taylor, Elisa Massoff, and Bicka Barlow. So when they say he was reminded and he did it anyway, and it's not just Ann Taylor protecting Bryan Kohberger, because it says attorneys for Bryan Kohberger include all three of these folks are still his attorneys, y'all, to this day, which tells me that this thing is not over from their perspective on what they planned on doing. And Mr. Turvey out doing what he's doing now may have thrown a monkey wrench, and he doesn't even sound like one of the experts that they're really going to rely on in this case. But for somebody to say they're friends with Bicka Barlow, she brought him onto the case, and what he's doing now is interfering with whatever their plans are, and he was reminded beforehand. I mean, I gotta look at this stuff in a way where I think I'm going to stick with my original determination of this and not jump on the bandwagon of a rogue expert that's out pushing things for, I don't even know why he's pushing them really. Is it to get public attention, to get Bryan Kohberger some good press, or is no press good press at this point? I'm going to stick with no press is good press in my opinion. But Bob, he is an expert. He worked for the defense. I mean, all the legal experts say there's no way Kohberger's team could turn this around at this point. Yeah, I understand. And, I've listened to legal experts and, professional experts, 30-year, detectives and crime scene specialists and everybody else break down things that I can see in this case and have known in this case for a long time. And I've seen them all consistently predict the wrong things, get things wrong. So I'm not going to start jumping on one's bandwagon now just because him and his friends and, Bicka Barlow and then Ann Taylor and Lisa Massoff told him to shut up about things that they apparently had already told him to shut up about before he even said them. So again, it sounds to me like a personal disagreement because they sent that cease and desist letter. He's having a personal disagreement with Ann Taylor. Now he's wanting to throw shade on them. Well, that's well and good if the shade is deserved. However, if there is a plan for Bryan Kohberger, then all that shade is certainly not going to help him. And in the end, I just want truth and justice. And when I hear people talking about things that seem to align with the truth, then I'm all for it. He said a lot of really good things in that interview that do align with the truth. But then there's other things that he pointed out that just doesn't seem to add up to me. And when things don't add up, well, then I have to side-eye you. And maybe I just have some trust issues, but you know what? Those trust issues go away when I listen to you long enough and what you say kind of lines up with reality. But as soon as you come out and you start saying things that don't really line up with reality, I'm going to pick you apart every time. Sorry, not sorry. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Please post your comments below and tell me what you think of what I've just covered in this. Am I wrong? Am I being too hard on him? Is it pitchforks for Ann Taylor and team at this point? Because it's not just Ann Taylor. You're also talking about Elisa Massoff and a California private attorney, Becca Barlow. It's been in law for years and years and years. So did they get her into the conspiracy when she's been working to free innocents for her entire career, it seems? It seems, I don't know, it seems unlikely to me, but who knows? They sure do have some reaching power in this thing. Piv's out.